Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
We learned to lose our wildness. We learned to cut off that part of us. And that's the part that is just so incredibly heartbreaking, because our wildness is what makes us feel so incredibly alive and authentic and just ourselves.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, Minisode number 518. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here with me. And today is a mini-sode. And before I forget, this is one of those, ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make. So I just went and completed this huge overhaul on the podcast. And I am changing ad agencies, basically. And I'm really excited about the way that the advertising is going to go from here on out. And I know that I said originally when I started doing these minisodes that they would be ad-free because they were going to be shorter. So what I have decided to do is that they are going to be, on average, they are around 15 or 20 minutes, and they are going to have ads in them. So you will hear even some of the episodes that are behind us that have happened in the past. They, from here on out, and what I mean by that, from this day forward, they are going to have ads in them. And to be totally transparent, for years, I've had this podcast for almost 10 years, you guys. It'll be 10 years in May of 2023, which is super exciting. And the truth of it is I lose money on it every month. It's expensive to have a podcast. I love doing it so much, and I love my production team immensely. They are fantastic. And as I move over into this ad agency, I am going to start to break even and hopefully make money from it. You know, I believe the people that help this podcast should be paid a living wage. And that's how we do it, through advertising. So I hope you understand. I'm sure that you will understand, and the podcast will be free to you, but there will be ads. So in doing this huge undertaking, I went back and listened to many of my old episodes, not all the way through, but just clips of them. And it just was an honor to listen to some of the amazing people that I've had on this show. My mind is blown that we are on episode 518, and it doesn't seem that long ago as I'm listening to some episodes like before even 100. I'm like, that doesn't seem like it was that long ago that I interviewed that person or had that conversation. And I'm just honored to be able to come here and do this for you every week. And episode 266, which aired in January of 2019, struck me. And the title of it is, Where Did Your Wildness Go? And one of the reasons that it struck me was because a lot of times when I do this podcast, I can hear and sort of see my own evolution, my own personal and sometimes professional, but definitely my own personal evolution. And that episode in particular was the birth of my 3rd book of Make Some Noise, and how I was feeling in that moment of what I felt needed to be written. This was right after the Me Too movement, and I was really starting to understand how the work that I do in the world in personal development and in serving all of you, women, feminist, people who identify as women, so much of it comes down to how we grew up, how we were raised, what our conditioning was. And this episode points to that. This episode points to a time when I was angry about it, the time when and sort of like my eyes were really peeling back and opening up to how much of our culture and society has impacted us. And I was full of anger about it. And you'll hear that in the episode. And in this episode, I also reference a worksheet that I created back then, and that is still available. And I want you to, I know y'all love a good worksheet to get your thoughts out on paper and your work out on paper. And so that absolutely still is available. It is going to be at AndreaOwen.com/518. That's where the show description is, the show notes are, and there will be a button on there that you can see where you can download that worksheet if you want it. Please keep in mind, it does have the old branding on it. It's still from when I was your kick-ass life, and I felt like you guys would understand. And it's still a really cute worksheet. So I didn't go through all the work of changing that worksheet, but the work is still the same. And in this episode, you'll hear me go through the questions with you. And I wanted to say a couple of things in this introduction before I hit play on that old episode from January of 2019. And lately, over the past couple of months, I have been having some conversations with an old friend of mine, and this person I knew this person in my late teens and all through my 20s, and this person has kind of just like reminded me of stories and anecdotes of our life and my life and sort of like how I used to be. And I'm not proud of all of the moments. Like some of them were a little reckless and, I don't recommend, but this person was reminding me of my own wildness and my own sort of just way of being when I cared less about what other people thought of me and, the consequences at hand and things like that. And again, there is a fine line between being just dangerous and illegal at time. No, not really. But just it's made me think a lot about the girl I used to be and the young woman I used to be and largely of what I left behind. And I think what I've come away with is sometimes that could be a good thing. And it's just a natural part of evolving, a natural part of growing up and changing the chapters of our life. But then sometimes I think, gosh, I want her back. I want some of her back. And I want to sort of wake up that part of me. And it's going to look different now that I am going to be 48 next month. I'm not 18 or 28 anymore. And so it just has given me a lot to think about. I might dive more into that. I'm seriously contemplating doing a Substack where I talk more specifically about some personal changes that I'm going through. And I would like a little more privacy around it, just because my mom and my kids. So if you're interested in that, I'm heavily thinking about posting over there and having a podcast, and it will be a very low cost thing for you guys to be involved in. There'll be discussion groups and things like that. So that's just something I'm sort of tossing around and leaning towards doing. And the last thing that I want to say before I release this older podcast episode is I want to remind you, it'll be a reminder for those of you who read Make Some Noise and something for those of you to think about who have not read Make Some Noise. And by the way, if you haven't read it, it's a great book. I do feel like it's my best work. And you can find out there's still bonuses available at AndreaOwen.com/MSN. And in the introduction of that book, I ask you, the reader, the question to think about: what is your conditioning versus what is your truth? And it's a question that you can think about anytime you are not setting a boundary or having a hard conversation, when you are maybe not applying for the job that you think is just out of reach, or not asking your boss for a raise or a promotion, or maybe not leaving a relationship because you're worried about hurting your partner's feelings, or maybe it's that time of your life where you really feel like culturally, the messaging has been that you should be partnered at this point. Maybe you're in your late 30s or in your 40s and you have always wanted to have kids, but you really aren't happy in your partnership. And what does your conditioning tell you versus what is your truth? Maybe your conditioning has told you that you are more valuable if you are partnered. You are more valuable if you are seen as someone who, quote unquote, was picked or is a mother. But your truth might be that you are not happy in this relationship. And if you did continue on, that you are settling. That might be something for you to think about. Or maybe it's something similar in a job or within your family or really anything. What is your conditioning versus what is your truth? And you could even, just generally speaking, you might not even be facing any sort of hard transition in your life. Maybe it's just life in general. You could answer that question. What have you been conditioned to believe about what it means to be a quote unquote good girl or good woman versus what is your truth? What is your authentic self hungry for? What is your most, the essence of your soul? What does it really want? What are your true desires? So just something to think about. What is your conditioning versus what is your truth? Thank you so much for those of you who've even been here since 2019, listening to the podcast. You might remember this episode. And I just want to emphasize, I emphasize it a lot when I start talking about it, but there's a podcast called Seen on Radio that you'll hear me reference. It's really good. It'll be in the show description. And I think that's about it. I think I covered everything. Thank you again. I just adore each and every one of you. I appreciate you for being here every week. I appreciate that you tell your friends about the show and that you text and share, particular episodes that you really liked. Please keep doing that. It helps so much. It helps other guests that I have on here that are amazing get seen more, and it helps my work be seen more as well. And you're also being in service. So I appreciate that immensely. And we're going to take a quick ad break and then get right into the show. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com.
All right. I am so pumped about this topic. And it came to me, like I mentioned, in a moment of inspiration when I was listening to the podcast that was mentioned a couple weeks ago. here. My friend Thais Sky mentioned it. And then I think in an intro a week or two before that said, okay, I listened to the podcast episodes and you have to go and listen to this because it's so good. The podcast is called Scene on Radio, SCENE. And it was in episode 10 in season 3. That particular season was called Men, and it's involved. I won't get into like all of the different episodes, but oh my God, it's so good, you guys. Okay. So this particular episode was done by, it was a different man than the regular host, but it was a man telling a story about his son going to 6th grade, going into middle school, and the changes that took place. So I'll let you listen to it so I won't get too far into it. And again, it's really good. I highly encourage you to go listen to both season 2 and 3. I have not listened to season 1 yet, so I can't vouch for it, but season 2 and 3 are excellent. And there was a particular part where a psychologist named Terrence Real, he also goes by Terry Real, was talking, and there's a quote that I want to read you that when he said it, it stopped me in my tracks and I had to pause the podcast and cry. Has that ever happened to you? Where something someone says hits you so hard where it just, it more or less takes you down. So to kind of set up the quote, he talks about how children are made to have themselves, and half, HALF, which the host jokes when the psychologist is talking about it. He's like, that's really difficult for radio, but he's talking about half, HALF. And essentially it means to cut off certain parts of themselves. And generally speaking, for boys, it's emotions. And he talks about a certain age when, and I quote, the patriarchy hits kids, lands on them, the psychic results can be severe. And he goes on to say, and here's the quote that really kind of took me down for a moment. He says, now, if you read the literature on girls and girls' development, that trauma, and I use that word on purpose, is traumatic to excise, to cut off half of your humanity. That trauma lands on girls about age 11, 12, 13, around the edge of adolescence. That's when they learn what Carol Gilligan calls the tyranny of the nice and kind. They learn to over-accommodate and resent it. That's the traditional setup. 50 years of the women's movement has changed that for a lot of girls and women, but it's still part of the culture. And I think the part, and I even played it back for my husband because I was like, here's what I need you to hear. When he says the tyranny of the nice and kind, they learn to over-accommodate and resent it. That's the traditional setup. And that's what I was like, holy shit, that's pretty much sums up my life. And I'm sure the life of so many of you. And it wasn't something I was unaware of, but I feel like sometimes when people, whether it's psychologists or whomever, put it in words that are different than how you can explain it, that's when it sort of just knocks you over. And that's the way I felt about that particular passage from him, from Terry Real. And it really got me thinking about us as women and femmes and what we are brought up to be, who we are brought up to be. And, maybe it hits me a little bit harder because my daughter is 9 and I'm watching it just start to happen with her and her friends. They're in 3rd grade. So they're still at that age for the most part where they are their true selves and they express themselves with their inherent ways of being. And if you've ever spent some time with children, especially younger children, like it's a really beautiful thing to watch just how true to themselves they are. And of course, it can be really annoying at times and inappropriate and it needs to be disciplined at certain times. But for the most part, the freedom that they inhabit is just a beautiful thing to watch. So in essence, as we enter puberty, and please keep in mind, of course, I'm generally speaking here when I say we, but in essence, as we enter puberty, and by the way, side note, he goes on in this episode to talk about how it hits even younger for boys. But we learn how to be. We learn to be nice and kind and friendly and accommodating. We learn to put other people's feelings, wants, and needs before our own. And I know this topic is sort of loaded. Not that I never talk about loaded things over here. But I think for me personally, and in talking to a lot of women lately, I feel this is common. What's going on now as culturally we are talking about these things more, and a lot of big things are happening where people are sort of waking up to what's happening culturally. And a lot of people are confused. A lot of people are going through some shit, right? And for me personally, 2018 was a really big year of healing, and it continues to do that. It's not that, once it was January 1st, 2019, I was healed, but it was a lot of uncovering things. And I've shared here on the podcast before that I have been no stranger to anger and rage. And for me, it was a very confusing feeling and emotion, because I didn't really grow up in a house where that was something that we expressed. I mean, pretty much feelings in general, but also I didn't know where it was coming from. And I immediately blamed it on people and my situation and things like that. And at the time, in my former life, in my former relationship and marriage, it was very easy to point the finger at him. And not to say that he didn't do some shitty things. He absolutely did. But it was, what I'm realizing now was that my anger was about that. What I just talked about is when I did hit puberty and those teenage years in learning what my quote unquote place was as a woman and how I was supposed to act and how I was definitely not supposed to act, those type of things made me enraged and feeling like I couldn't be the way I truly was born to be. And not only that, but when I felt angry and distressed about it, that was wrong too. And it was kind of more or less like stuck between a rock and a hard place, the confusion and not knowing. And so 2018 was a lot of coming to terms with that and the realization of, oh, okay, that's what that was. And a lot of grief as well. A lot of grief. And I think actually that probably started right after my dad died in October of 2016. And swimming my way through that and going through the weeds and practicing all of the tools that I have and that I teach all of you and in my group programs. And it was a real deep dive. It was a real deep dive. And I do feel like I'm kind of coming out the other end. And it's so much self-awareness and it's so much of doing the work. And so side note, what that looks like is journaling. And because I'm extroverted, I process things out loud, which I know is not the case for many of you, but I learn things about myself by talking about them. So that's either with my therapist or my husband or my best friend, Amy, or the other really good friends that I have. And it is extremely helpful. And I encourage you to do all of that. And if you struggle with that, the mentorship is for you. Just saying, it'll change your life. I'm not lying. But really, it's about getting curious. And that's what I want for you. Whether this has been something that's weighing heavy on your mind with me, or if it's something you're just kind of realizing as I'm saying these words, wherever you are on that spectrum, I would love for you to explore this some more. And so what I have done is I've created a worksheet for you. I'm a big fan of curiosity, and curiosity can pretty much always, I think I can say that with confidence. Curiosity, if you are open enough to it, can bring clarity, even if that clarity is what are the next steps I need to inquire on within myself? What are the next steps? What are the next things I need to talk about and explore with my therapist or my coach or maybe another self-help book or something like that?
You know when you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone a father and daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who was graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
But if you go to episode details in iTunes and scroll down, there is a yellow button that says download the worksheet, and you can get the worksheet. And this is all handy dandy printed out for you to do your own work, whether you write it out on that worksheet or get your own journal. But I'm going to kind of whip through some questions here that I think will help you in your curiosity to get more clear about this. So the first question is this. Let's start from the beginning. What was modeled for you growing up? In other words, were the rules, I'm using quotes here, were the rules that were they specifically said, for instance, don't cause a fuss, keep still, that's not ladylike, we don't do that in this house? Or maybe it was a religious organization that you were a part of where it was very much like there were rules for women, or perhaps they weren't explicitly said, but they were implied. So that might have looked like the way your parents or other caregivers talked about other women or how women should be. Or maybe in your family, it was a very traditional roles that your mom stayed home and left her career behind and took care of everyone. And, maybe your dad didn't help out a whole lot, or, like where you just learned at an early age the way things were for men and the way things were for women. So sometimes just starting out there with what is your story? I think this can be really helpful in so many topics, like around money and relationships, but specifically in terms of roles for women or how women should be. What was modeled for you? And what was the early messaging that you received around that? The next question is, were you ever shamed or chastised for being loud, aggressive, or maybe bossy? And so these are the kind of virtues that weren't in the category of feminine or girly. Was that ever a thing? I know it was for me. And I remember fairly early on knowing what was okay and what was not okay. So again, so it's were you ever outright shamed or chastised? And it might have even been subtle things where a parent sort of like gave you a look or, I don't know if you've ever met my mom, but my mom could give a look that would murder someone. And I learned that very early on as far as like what was okay and was not okay. In general, I think one of the most important, well, they're all important, but really what would make me really curious for all of you to really dig into is, in general, do you remember losing your wildness? And that's really sort of the word that came up for me when I was listening to that psychologist on that podcast. And I don't think it was a word that was ever used in there, but that's what just was like flashing in my brain as he was talking about that. And I thought to myself, we learned to lose our wildness. We learned to cut off that part of us. And that's the part that is just so incredibly heartbreaking, because our wildness is what makes us feel so incredibly alive and authentic and just ourselves, like our true selves. And wildness doesn't have to be, I'm not necessarily talking about being out of control or uncivilized. I'm talking about your inherent passion, you free to be however it comes naturally for you. It's you without rules or expectations of how a woman should be. Like, imagine a life or a planet or a country even that wasn't a thing. Like, can you imagine if we were all born into a society that there were no categories of masculine and feminine, or, and it just is like, holy shit, like, how would you be different? I think for many women, that can be a really difficult question to answer because we don't know any other way. It's so ingrained in us, and probably as far back as we can remember, this is just the way it has always been. Like, we've swam in it our whole goddamn lives. So it can be difficult to imagine a life where that's just not the case, where you are free to be your wild self and just inherently who you are. And maybe it's something that you can't pinpoint and remember losing your wildness. And maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but something you can look back on now as an adult and remember. Do you remember it being around the time you went through puberty? Was it in high school? Was it in college? Was it younger than puberty? Is it something like that? And maybe it's watching your own children grow up, or your nieces and nephews, and watching them start to change. Maybe that can bring up some things for you in your life. So the next question is, when you think of your wildness, whose opinions or judgments are you the most afraid of, and why? Whose opinions and expectations are you the most afraid of, and why? It might be everyone. It might be just the culture at large. It might be specific people at work. It might be your parents. It might be your siblings, your partner. And the next question is, are these fears valid? And for some of you, they might be. It might be a matter of, I think another thing that I walked away from that particular podcast series, and I don't know if it was in that episode or not, but they were talking about the way that we are conditioned to be. And this is another thing that hit me really hard too, that it's not just a matter of, well, these are the way things are and we don't question them, but it's also, us being a certain way is important to our survival. And once I heard that, I was like, oh, God damn it. Yeah. I resonate with that. I don't know if you do too, but it's like, oh shit, like, yeah, we need to be a certain way so that we can attract a partner. And I don't know the science behind it. I don't know if it's this biological thing that we have, like peacocks, like show their feathers and in order to attract a mate. But I think culturally that's how it's been created for us. Like we have to be a certain way in order to survive, in order to not get murdered as well as thrive. And I think like that's the part that pisses me off. I mean, I don't know if it does for anybody else, but that's the part that pisses me off. But that's my question. When you think of your wildness, whose opinions or judgments are you the most afraid of? Why? And are these fears valid? What I'm asking you to do is just to dig deeper in that. Some of you may answer that question as no, those fears are completely unnecessary and not valid. And for some of you, you might answer, yes, they are valid. And why? So again, this isn't about coming to like hard and fast conclusions about your life and where to go next. What I want for you is to get curious and dig deeper about this topic. 2 more questions for you to ask yourself. And again, you can download the worksheet and get all of these handy dandy. What would need to happen to get some of your wildness back? What would you need to let go of? This is like, a multi-part question. What would need to happen to get some of your wildness back? What would you need to let go of? Whose opinions and expectations would you need to walk away from? And that is not easy, my friends, at all. When you've lived your entire life, I work with people who come to me in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, and younger too. But, I'm thinking of a handful of clients who have been in their 40s, 50s, and they have lived their entire life sort of doing this song and dance hustle, based on, they've based their behaviors, thoughts, feelings, everything around the opinions and expectations of others. And to walk away from that feels like, there's a line in my poem, Resignation, where I say, it feels like wiping off my skin. That's the way it can feel. We have made this our whole life many times. So how do we do that? And it's not simple and it's multi-layered, and I feel you, sister, if that's a big deal for you. The last question is, how would you start the journey of calling your wildness back to you? And really, when I think of the work that I do, that's what that is about, because it's foundational. It's around values. It's around shame resilience. It's around looking at the behaviors that you do that are no longer serving you anymore and choosing different ones that are more in alignment with the woman that you want to be. But for you, how could you start the journey of calling your wildness back to you? Okay, I desperately need a drink of water, and this has taken a lot out of me because I feel so strongly about this, and it's probably something you're going to hear more of. And if you've been with me from the beginning since 2010, you know that I have taken you on a journey with me along my own personal development journey, and I always strive to be transparent with you about what I'm going through, and in hope that it's helpful for you too. I never ever want to be that person who acts like a guru and an expert. Like, I know everything. I never have hard things come up for me anymore. You just need to do what I say and do what I do. And no. I want my hope for you, by the way, as I'm talking about this, my hope always for you is that even if you have a hard time believing it sometimes, but inherently that you are the expert in your own life. You have the capability to be your own hero. There's a line in one of my favorite movies, Whip It, because I love roller derby. And the main character, Bliss, she says, she's telling the derby girls, you guys are like my heroes. And Kristen Wiig's character says, put on some skates and be your own hero. And oh my God, that line. It's like, yes, girl, be your own hero. And that's what I want for all of you, is to start to trust yourself and know what your values are and what they look like, and find the path to be your own hero, to be the own expert in your life, because you are. And my hope also is that you find some of your wildness and call on her, and that she shows up for you wherever she has been buried, wherever she was let go of in your life. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. This went off in directions that I didn't anticipate, but that's what I love the most, just sort of riffing over here without a script or anything like that. And until next time, ass kickers, I will see you all out in cyberspace.
Actually, wait, we're not done. Hi, I'm back. Can you tell that I had a cold when I recorded that a few years ago? I just wanted to swing by before I closed out the show and just remind you that that worksheet is over at AndreaOwen.com/518, or you can grab the link in the show description if you want to download it and do the work on your own. Again, I hope you enjoyed this archived episode. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now, everybody. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes, AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free and get your hands on that free podcast feed.
Hey there, I'm Debbie Reber, the founder of Tilt Parenting and the author of the book Differently Wired. The mission of Tilt is to change the way neurodivergence, whether that's having a learning disability, having ADHD, being gifted, autistic, or some combination of all of the above, is perceived and experienced so differently wired kids and the parents like us raising them can truly thrive. On the Tilt Parenting podcast, I get to talk with authors, therapists, educators, and parenting experts who are committed to this mission. I ask the questions my listeners are most curious about when it comes to supporting our kids. And in turn, my guests share strategies for challenges, out-of-the-box ideas for navigating school, best practices for therapies, tips for advocating, and so many thoughtful insights on what it really takes to help our kids grow up feeling seen and respected so they can create awesome lives for themselves. I know that raising a differently wired kid can feel overwhelming and isolating, but I promise you, you are not alone, and it can feel so much better. If you're on this parenting journey, come listen to Tilt Parenting. Together, we can shift this paradigm and show up for our exceptional kids with hope, possibility, and joy.